Kia ora koutou katoa and welcome to the Spark Lab Speaker Series event. I'm Simon Pound and it's my privilege to be your host for today's discussion, Crafting and Scaling the Brands of the Future. These are the brands that are being built with greater sustainable aspirations for a global audience, all starting from right here in New Zealand. If you haven't joined us before, the Spark Lab Speaker Series is about delivering business inspiration, advice and thought-provoking conversations with globally respected leaders from a diverse range of business backgrounds. Joining us today are two very special guests who, over the last 4 years, have built Australasia's first certified climate-positive farm. They have done things like changing the shearing remuneration matrix to prioritise animal welfare and have partnered only with merino clients who share their climate aspirations. They've changed to regenerative practices and are showing farmers how to build farm brands and profit from climate-positive practices. To most New Zealanders, they will need no introduction because they're also the co-founders of 42 Below Vodka and have served on the boards of Trilogy and Akoya. Please welcome serial entrepreneurs and environmental campaigners Justine and Geoff Ross. Tēnā koe, thank you for being with us.
Morena, and thanks for having us.
Hi Simon, thanks for having us. Of all the things we've ever done, it's a humble bale of wool that we're proudest of. So we've had people on walkie-talkies, radio upstairs to have cocktails ready for us, and we've had the whole staff of the Ritz line up to shake the hands of our children and ourselves. And we've seen our products in Harvey Nicks and Selfridges, and it's still a humble bale of wool with our carbon clear logo on it. That matters. So to build a brand and to be part of work every day that actually contributes to the healing of the planet is our greatest achievement, and it is our purpose. Lake Hāwea Station is Australasia's first climate positive farm. It's certified by the government agency Toitu. And we hope that that certification and our move in that direction will encourage many more participants in the agribusiness sector to make the changes. With 40% of our country's landmass being sheep and beef farms, we feel like this could be the start of our biggest ever brand.
A real material difference. Yeah.
Recently, we were filmed for a TV show, and the interviewer asked me, why all the branding? It's everywhere. And it is. It's on thermoses, vehicles, buildings, letterhead, clothing. And unlike Yellowstone, though, we're not yet on the chests of our team. So it's fortunate that halfway through our lives, as we sought to leave the city and head to Hāwea, that our values, or call it moral clarity around the climate crisis, and our heritage have merged to a point where the biggest shift in popular culture is also intersecting. So this is Geoff and I in 150 hectares of regenerative pasture on Lake Hāwea Station. We believe in regen, but we're collecting data so that the production rates can do the talking, and to prove that with less inputs, we can do more and be more profitable. So healthier carbon sequestering soils is our goal. And look, this is an example, regen, of early adoption, disruption, sector change. And that seems to be the fairly exhausting hallmark of our mode of operating. Geoff and I both come from rural families, mine from horticulture and dairy, and Geoff's from deer, dairy and cropping. We've campaigned for the environment for over 30 years through Greenpeace and with becoming a foundation trustee of Pure Advantage 15 years ago. So these two factors, our heritage and our family's climate anxiety, our eldest son is actually studying carbon in Australia, led to what Malcolm Gladwell would call a cumulative set of advantages, which places us smack in the field of popular culture change.
Look, we worked for many years on other people's brands, and as we moved to work on our own brands, what we realized is that we always wanted to be part of a category that's in growth. So we wanted natural tailwinds to exist. So I just want to go through these because it's been a reoccurring theme in the businesses that we've worked on and worked in. And I think it's led to what is the biggest tailwind probably in recorded history, which we're now involved in. So with 42 Below, look, Justine and I were probably part of the tailwind. We started drinking a lot of cocktails in Wellington bars in the late 90s. And we observed that cocktail culture was experiencing a bit of a renaissance. And we'd done enough travel overseas to realize that this was actually a global thing. So we realized that cocktails were in growth. The key ingredient in cocktails is vodka. And so we thought this is a great category to be part of because it's in growth. But more than that, we needed something unique. And we looked to our own country for what we thought would give it a unique point of difference on the world stage. And really, vodka's key trait is all about purity. And the world, thankfully, views New Zealand as a very pure place. So that was our unique advantage in a growth category. Post 42 Below, we got several approaches from businesses to invest, one being Hāwea, a natural fragrance company. And we witnessed, like many people at that time, the rise in all these home decorating shows. So what we realized is the tailwind was that people were becoming house proud. We wanted to show off our homes, not just how they looked, but how they smelt. And so we cared about what fragrances we had in our homes. So we could see that as a growth category. But more than that, we wanted something unique. And again, we looked to nature, really, and we looked to plant-based waxes instead of paraffin-based waxes, which the bulk of our competitors had for our unique advantage. We then looked at Trilogy, a fantastic startup that approached us in natural skincare. And we obviously, a tailwind that's existed for many, many years is about beauty. And we all want to, I guess, resist the aging process as best we can. And there's a growing awareness that our skin is actually our body's largest organ. So why on earth would you put something synthetic or chemical-like on your skin? So natural skincare seemed like an obvious advantage for us there as well. With more beer, we realized that consumers more and more are choosing quality over quantity. We'd seen it in spirits, and it was coming to all beverage, really. So we realized that there's going to be a growth in craft beer because of this tailwind, really, this change in consumer preference. I think we recognized that probably about the same time as 300 other New Zealand businesses recognized this. And we had this fantastic, vibrant growth category, which is craft beer in New Zealand. So we got onto a tailwind, but we really didn't have a really strong, distinct point of difference.
So acknowledging tailwinds and converting them to practice in your own business requires bravery, and then you'll get your skeptics. So my first book was called Every Bastard Says No. We are well used to no. When we went to the then New Zealand government for a feasibility study on 42 Below, the report that we couldn't afford at the time that we commissioned came back and said no, a New Zealand vodka will not work. We went to the then bottle maker that we had, and we wanted an extra tall bottle to fit into Waitrose, to the shelves in Waitrose. And the bottle maker came back, oh, no, we can't do that. And we went ahead with that tall bottle, and it's worth mentioning that that Waitrose eventually altered their shelf size to accommodate our extra tall bottle. So we went to the NZX, to the first brand to do so purely for growth capital. And there were a huge amount of skeptics within the investment banking community, business commentary community. No was a word we got very, very familiar with. And what we did was we irritated. We I guess, created this irreverent brand and pioneered new ways of communicating and marketing. And I want to give you just a couple of examples of that. One in particular in New York City. So in New York, a new vodka launched every single week with a launch party budget bigger than our entire marketing budget for a year. And so we had to come up with innovative and brave ways to build our brand and get it traction in the city, where if you make it there, you make it anywhere. So take a look at this slide of the 42 Below Snow Patrol. Just a little idea that I came up with, where our guys would go out with their big 42 puffers and their 42 truck, and they would clean the pavements going into the hottest bars and restaurants of New York City. Well, the patrons loved it because their Balenciaga shoes stayed dry. The bartenders loved it because they had mates to yarn with outside and they weren't having to do the path clearing themselves. And so what happened was, this little story, this wee initiative, got us onto the very influential page 6 of the New York Times. And it's in increments like this that we built our brand, its reputation, and its stories. We've got another cool example of the Venice Biennale, where when we went to Venice for the Biennale, we wanted to have the absolute hottest party in the whole event. And yet we found out that we were right on the border of some noise control problems, right? And
so was every other country's party was inside the zone that had to shut down at 9 p.m, which is hardly a party.
Yeah, so that's not the Kiwi way. So what we did was got our little team together, and we found a amazing venue. And you can see, it's not the greatest slide, but you can see the beautiful brick walls. We found this incredible venue, which was right on the outskirts of the noise control censorship. And we had the best party that the Biennale had ever seen. And in fact, all the other countries jumped across to our party, which went all night. So sector disruption's been a big part of what we're about, and Geoff came up with 2 ideas that changed the way that the global liquor industry treated the trade. They were world class, and they have since been copied and have gone on to be adopted by pretty much all of the major global liquor brands. So super proud of them, and I'll let Geoffy tell you about them.
Yeah, well, look, it was trudging around London one night, having a particularly probably disappointing sales day, that this idea of the Cocktail World Cup came to mind. So in speaking to mixologists, as they like to be called, most of them were saying, yeah, I kind of like your vodka, but we can't stock it because we've got this big deal with X big spirit brand. But what's New Zealand like? My friend went there once. I heard you can go bungee jumping there. So on the back of that, we thought, well, hang on, we can't seem to get our vodka in there, but they all want to come to New Zealand. Maybe we can use that as the carrot and lever open that door. So the other observation was that we all perform best under competition. We all like to represent our country. So that's where the concept of the Cocktail World Cup came from. 42 bartenders from around the world representing their country. We brought them to Queenstown. The first thing they did is jump off a bridge and shake a cocktail whilst they're doing it. And not only did we super engage those most influential mixologists, which opened their doors back home, we got some of those images on to television and some of the newspapers around the world. So that was a relatively cost-effective event, really, which gave us a huge amount of coverage and leverage. The other one was Vodka U. As much as bartenders like to think they are very skilled at their craft, they also realize that there's others in their category they could probably learn from. We met this amazing chap called Jacob Bryars. So we thought, look, there is education and study in pretty much every other sector except for mixology. So let's create Vodka University. And that's what we did. Our professor was Jacob rather, and he traveled the world giving Vodka U tutorials. People were certified, and often that led to them stocking 42 Below as well.
And we weren't into anti-competitive behaviour either. So when Jacob would present, and he did so on the BBC and in many other extremely eminent forums, he would present all the vodkas in the category and talk about their different properties. And so I think that was one of the things that really endeared the community to what we were up to. And, you know, with the Vodka World Cup, we brought 42 bartenders, but we also brought the world media down.
Yeah.
And that was just wonderful. They went back talking about New Zealand. And just to give you an example of the competitive environment, there would be vodka offering, say, $200,000 for the well pour of one bar at the time. And someone would come to New Zealand and they would have this amazing experience for the week. And then they would go, oh, no, thanks. You know, we've got 42 below. And it was that kind of loyalty and brand awareness that was built through experiences and through respect for the craft that I think really elevated us and certainly put us on the radar of Bacardi, which was the largest privately owned liquor company in the world.
Obviously, influencers in the cocktail category are mixologists, and there's that saying, influence the influencers. It's a great way to start a brand's life. In skincare, it's obviously quite different. The Duchess of Cambridge was fantastic, actually. In a magazine interview, she named Trilogy Rosehip Natural Rosehip Oil as her key skincare brand, especially when she was pregnant and maintaining, you know, fantastic skin through her pregnancy. That was a massive moment for the life of that brand, really, and triggered sales all around the world. And more, it was probably a little different and a little more patriotic. It was when New Zealand Olympians would come back to New Zealand House, and we came up with a supply deal for New Zealand House in London and in Rio, where the Olympians would celebrate their performance with a Moa beer. And those images went really round New Zealand quite quickly, and I think helped move some drinkers away from that perhaps German named beer owned by a large Japanese company to a New Zealand named beer owned by New Zealanders. And that was a key point for that brand also.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of global disruption, the New Zealand House concept. And that was in 2012 at the Olympics. And at the time, no other international company actually had a place where people who didn't have some kind of official requirement or pass could go to celebrate. So a coming together of a group of people who were there perhaps supporting their country. And so we came up with the idea of New Zealand House and did it just outside of King's Cross Station.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
And we had the help of...
well, Zinzanbrook kind of knocked together a bit of a barbecue. Whole bunch of local Kiwi expats chipped in. It was very backyard Kiwi.
It really was. And the Olympians would come after they'd perhaps won a medal, and they would celebrate with ordinary New Zealanders who had travelled from New Zealand all the way to London to be there. And it was just incredible. And you might have seen the news clippings where it burnt down.
Yeah.
We had a barbecue go awry, but the spirit of the place was extraordinary. And so we sought to do that again 4 years later in Rio with another New Zealand house. And I think that it's these sort of brave and strategic global moves that help you build international traction for brands.
Look, obviously being part of a growth category is important. Overcoming no's is really important. In fact, a colleague once told me, a no's not a no until you've heard it at least 7 times. So be prepared to overcome a bunch of no's. Understanding where the influences are, be they people or kind of key environments that your brand needs to be in, is important. But obviously so too is technology. And technology continues to be, in fact, it continues to grow as an influence in the building of businesses. One of the key things that really ignited 42 Below was the release of these MPEGs, these little movies, which was actually just before YouTube arrived. So a friend, Daryl, created these great little radio ads. He then said, I should put some pictures to those. And he then said, hey, we might release these as an MPEG. And we'd release them and come back to work the next morning and realize that it had 100,000 views. And those little things traveled the world. So it was a great piece of technology that propelled 42 Below. Look, now starting to realize what the value of technology can do for farming. And we use technology at Lake Hāwea Station in many areas, actually. I'm just going to quickly go over a few. The coolest one is a little program we run on all our phones called Farm IQ. So it's really about recording stock management, natural fertilizer use, seed mixes, animal health. So it's in our pockets wherever we go around the farm. But it also, as we have EID, electronic identification in our sheep, it also lets us know where our sheep are at any one time. But the cool thing about that is we sell our wool to various fashion brands around the world. It also lets them know where the sheep are. Now, there's a cool brand called Sheep Inc. It's short for Sheep Included. So when you buy a Sheep Inc. sweater, here's one here, you get to adopt a sheep. And there's this wee button on the bottom of the sweater, and there's a wee QR code on the inside of that button. And you scan that QR code, and it goes to the farm the sweater came from.
This sweater comes complete with hay from the farm. Perfect.
Is that a good wear? So let's say you adopted a sheep when you bought a sweater. That sheep was called Dolly. Dolly is a two-tooth, so she's a young mum to be. And Jack, our farm manager, has just put the two tooths in a paddock. We call it Still Lake. And Jack will do a little note and might say, hey, the two tooths have just gone to Still Lake. The regen pasture is looking fantastic, and they'll meet their boyfriend there in a week's time. So if you've bought that sweater and adopted Dolly and you live in New York, you'll get a little notification saying Dolly is in a great bit of pasture and she'll be meeting her boyfriend next week. So that ultra traceability, which connects consumers right to the source, is really a key thing that we as farmers in New Zealand can now do thanks to technology. Look, really quickly, some other forms. We actually, we do use a lot of working dogs. They're amazing. They're probably the most valuable tool on the station. But we also use drones now for mustering and finding out where our stock are. They're a fantastic way of covering the hill quickly, perhaps when our legs get a little tired. We also use something called FetPack, which is amazing. So that allows us, without boring you too much, but one of the biggest issues we face in farming is worms, worm count, right? We don't want our sheep to have worms or cattle. If so, we need to drench them. Drenching is expensive and time consuming. So you want to make sure you actually have a problem if you are going to drench. And also because if you over drench and they don't have worms and you're drenching, you create worm resistance. And so many parts of New Zealand now have worm resistance. So this cool little mobile microscope, which you plug into your cell phone or your laptop, you're out in the paddock, you can take a little sample from a bit of sheep poo, have a look at it, put it under the microscope. Within 20 minutes, you know your worm count and you know whether you need to drench or not. So you can lower your resistance, lower your drench costs. But importantly, if the sheep do need a drench, you can do it that day. We also use Overseer for calculating our emissions and a whole bunch of other technology for making sure.
Can I just talk about my favorite one, which I know why Geoff hasn't mentioned it, and that's because it hasn't gone anywhere yet. But we want to be early adopters, right? So we were the first farm to trial facial recognition for sheep. And I used to think sheep just all look the same. Now I can assure you that everyone has a distinct face and a different eye. So different eyes. So it's called iris and it's facial recognition for sheep, and we're working on it. It just means that they come through the yards and you just scan them and you can tell everything about the wellness of that animal, which I'm super excited about because animal welfare is one of my big things.
Yeah, it's just like when you approach the camera, now that we can all travel again, we'll be doing this hopefully, approach the camera coming in through customs and it brings up your details. The same will be true in sheep.
Technology is also obviously a huge part of brand building. We use Instagram, where we've really organically grown a following of really quality followers so that we can open source a lot of the work that we do.
Yeah, and talk to not only the farming community about what we're doing to become climate positive, but actually a huge amount of people offshore will make inquiry, and we're connecting now with farms all over the world and actually consumers all over the world who are really interested in not just our wool, but some of the other products that we're now producing.
So we've taken our original logo and we've extended it through to a regenerative logo, which depicts some of the 30 different plants that you'd see in one of our pastures and some of the insects that are buzzing around those extraordinary pastures as well.
Technology obviously makes a huge difference in your business, whether it be connecting with customers, storing data, creating new models, creating new connections for your distribution chain. But at the end of the day, we still work with animals. And one of the first things actually Justine noticed in sharing and gathering our merino fleece is that it's a model that's only built really on speed. Shearers are only incentivized on how many sheep they shear. Yet in talking to customers, we are marketers, I guess, and we've spoken to a lot of customers, they're not interested in speed. They're interested really in the health and the well-being of that sheep. So Justine came up with a new model.
Well, the idea really was to look at the welfare of that animal and not be focused on throughput. So some of our clients internationally are very focused on animal welfare, and certainly for me, fresh eyes on a station, I just couldn't understand the traditional model and how it served the shearer. The anxiety and the stress of having to pump through a quota of animals and be the fastest. I couldn't understand how it served the fleece and the quality of the fleece that was coming off the animal. But most of all, I couldn't understand how it served the animal. Their adrenals were heightened, dogs barking, music pumping, and the rate of throughput was just incredibly stressful from my perspective. So we introduced a little bit of classical music to the sheds, but most importantly, we came up with a baseline that every shearer would be remunerated for, and then that they would be rewarded or get a bonus over and above that for the way that the animal came onto the boards, the care for the sheep on the boards, making sure that sheep was stress free. There was a great connection between the shearer and the sheep often, and then the sheep left the boards in a happy, calm way. Yeah, and even how it was penned. And I think the beautiful part of this for me is that when we spoke to our head shearer, Kevin, he said that while they found it difficult at first and very confronting, that when they realized that they were going to do things differently at Lake Hāwea Station, that they would finish their week with us, and then that they would take that newfound respect for the animal, and that would go with them to the next farm and the next farm. And for me, that was very, very moving. And, you know, but I don't want to get all soppy on you. I want you to understand also that there's a commercial benefit to this, and that is that our clients love that. So Lake Hāwea Station has made a very specific decision to only partner with brands that share their values. So here in New Zealand, we're partnered with Maggie Marilyn, who are incredible in relation to the circularity of their products and the sustainability. And then Another Tomorrow in New York, which is a extraordinary new brand with some global agendas that are quite remarkable and in high fashion. And then also Sheep Inc. from London. So very specific partnership decisions, all sharing the same values as our property.
So look, we just want to finish with a little recent win. It may seem a small story, but we actually think it has the ability to travel. It potentially could be our Lake Hāwea Station's Snow Patrol moment, because it's a story that may reach other parts of the world via social media. And we think PR, which by the way has to be one of the strongest ways in building your brand. It's a story of a skink. Now, for those of you who don't know, a skink is a lizard. And look, when we came to Lake Hāwea Station in 2018, we heard that there was once a skink that existed out the back of our property called the Western Grand Skink. It's a particularly big guy. It's about 30 centimeters long. But in 2010, Doc was so worried about this skink that they removed as many as they could, because it was the last remaining population in the wild, and they relocated them to a skink enclosure for protection. When we got there, we wondered if they remained. So look, in 2018, we did a little survey. we took a look.
Our son and a skink expert, Carrie Knox, went out the back with a group of students from wildlands in the States, and they surveyed. They came back and down to the homestead and said nothing. 3 days, nothing. And we were pretty sad. And then I think it was the third day they came home and they had found 20 plus one juvenile, which indicated that they were breeding, which was absolutely amazing. So we went to work trapping and doing what we could to keep predators away, to support them. And then during the 2 years of lockdown, every time we tried to get our skink expert or the weather conditions were right, it had to be summer and when it was hot for the rocks, we couldn't get anyone back to come and survey again. So just a few weeks ago, all the stars aligned, and our skink expert went out the back to see how things were going. And look, I just want to, this was a population that were left for dead. And out the back, Carrie and a gorgeous man from volunteer from Forest and Bird went out, and they found 35. Which for us was just incredibly beautiful and emotional. It's the last known population of the Western Grand Skink on Earth. So, you know, we're facing a terrible biodiversity crisis here in New Zealand and worldwide, along with, you know, the climate crisis. And when you get a wee win like that, it's a wonderful thing to be able to share with your community and with your country. And so we feel like this is our farm version of our of our Snow Patrol moment.
And we'll be proudly telling our brand partners, and I think they'll be proudly telling their consumers as well, as what climate positive, you know, biodiversity rich farming can do for our food and fibre.
And what we're really hoping for ultimately is a public-private collaboration that can, you know, continue to do good work in that space. So look, you may be watching as an FMCG brand or business-to-business or business-to-consumer brand, but the way that you address the climate and biodiversity and sustainability in your business, we truly believe will determine your future success. So 2 kids from South Auckland just got busy. They ignored the nose, built a world-class vodka brand and helped with some other brands along the way, and then moved to Lake Hāwea Station. And our work there to influence the influencers, to hopefully change policy in the agribusiness space, that's our true legacy. Saving skinks and promoting climate emergency awareness in our sector and hopefully beyond is a much better legacy than selling cocktails to the world. And I guess we've got to grow up sometime.
Hey, thank you both for sharing that wonderfully compelling talk. As you can imagine, Justine and Geoff are admired by many in the business world here in New Zealand. And so we've had a raft of questions coming in. So let's get started. First up here, one asking, how do you balance strategic thinking and operational thinking?
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest challenges we face, actually. I think many businesses face. I think you've just got to deliberately put aside time for a strategic session with the whole team, because if you don't, you know, time marches on, and before long you're in the weeds, which at our place can happen quite literally.
On the farm, it's getting off site for strategic thinking, and also it's the environment that you create around that. So often we'll fire up some podcasts or listen to some journalists that we think are, you know, pretty global and interesting, that feed into whatever our thinking is at the time, and we'll just generate discussion from good thinkers.
How do you two work together and create a professional and relationship balance?
Yes, that is a tough one. And I think if we're honest, the real answer is not very well. So I think we probably need to take some advice on that one, if you've got any recommendations, Simon.
It is incredibly difficult. I don't think any there's been no time in our lives that it's been harder than it is now. We have a huge amount of respect for the rural sector because everything bleeds out in this sector specifically. We do respect each other, and we're very different skill sets. So when we take a deep breath and take the time to hear each other, then we do better. But it's hard.
Great advice there. Another question here saying, when trying to break into an international market, what's worked for you both to ensure a small company from New Zealand can get that first foot in the door?
Yeah, well, probably a little tougher more recently, but what's worked for us is that personal contact, being there. In fact, it was just before lockdown that we met with Sheep Inc. in London, and really that was the start of that relationship. And I don't know if we could have done it without a personal meeting.
And it's those little challenger moments, those brave little ideas that you have. And that's how we got traction with 42 Below for sure. And in many ways, that's how we're doing it with Lake Hāwea Station, defining who we are, creating a personality and coming up with little innovative ideas that seem to create momentum.
Yeah.
What's the main thing that you would do differently if you could go back to the start of the journey and start again?
Well, we often think of that, and there are a bunch, in hindsight, obviously, there's a huge number of learnings. I think the biggest one for me often is harder, faster, sooner. That was definitely the case in 42 Below. I think in retrospect, I think we'd wish we had the confidence to really go hard right from the outset.
I'm not sure if halfway through my life I would have taken on 6,500 hectares. So maybe that's what I would have done. Nothing. No, it is a good legacy. It's just tough. Yeah.
It was really interesting to hear you talk about tailwinds in the chat. And there's a question here wondering what you think might be the really next big thing for New Zealand in an export sense.
I think in an export sense, it's again what's inherent to New Zealand's values and our unique attributes worldwide. And in the face of climate change, it has to be as our ability as a country, whether it be in agribusiness or any other business, to adapt and become climate positive. That's going to be a huge advantage worldwide. It has to be. Otherwise, the world's going to be, in a pretty dire place.
I hope it's R&D. I hope that's where we invest in the sector that we support, and I hope that we take our thought IP all over the world. Science.
Have you had ideas for projects that you've then chosen not to pursue?
We have so many abandoned projects. When 42 was starting up, we had a boat building business, a curated items business.
Yeah, product
placement agency. What else?
Yeah, and we've got a couple on the go at the moment that are sitting in the top drawer. So yes is the answer. And I think actually Karen Walker said this to us once. She said one of the great skills in today's environment when there's so much information, so many opportunities, is how to be a great editor. So being a smart editor is a great skill set to have.
That's so interesting. And then a question here around 42 Below was launched in 1998, and interested in kind of the big changes that you've seen between launching a brand 20 odd years ago and today, and kind of what's become easier and what's become harder.
Well, I don't think it's become easier overall. I think one thing that has become easier, and we've certainly noticed this in New Zealand, is access to capital is easier now than it was, especially for startups. Now there is, albeit small, quite a vibrant startup community here, which is, I think, exciting for New Zealand to be. Look, however, there are all sorts of challenges that have always existed. Things take time to produce, often much longer than you think, time to get to market, and, ultimately the ability to scale and get an audience internationally is New Zealand's biggest challenge. So the quicker you do that, the better.
Yeah, I think our ability to support entrepreneurial spirit is a little better. but our tolerance for failure is still not great. And you listen to any sports person and they'll say they learn more in the losses than they do in the wins. And so I think that we need to be a lot kinder to our startups, and we need to take a look at the jockey, not just the horse. And continue to really encourage entrepreneurial spirit, and also to be incredibly supportive of people when they do well, because there is some cynicism within our business journalism community about whether people that do well deserve our ongoing respect. And I think that, becoming a successful entrepreneur doesn't always feel that great because of this sort of, skepticism about what happens next. And the reality is that most entrepreneurs become serial entrepreneurs and keep contributing to society. And so I think, more support for our young entrepreneurs.
As a final thought, if someone's watching this and is inspired, and perhaps they're a sheep or dairy farmer, what would be the first steps they could start to make to get on this journey towards being carbon positive?
I think for sheep and beef farmers, particularly in New Zealand, there's a real opportunity to know your number, and in dairy as well. So the first thing you can do is go to an online calculator. Trees That Count have one, Beef and Lamb have one. That'll give you a sense for where your carbon number sits. You can get that audited by foresters or by Toitu, and then you're going to know what you need to do, and it might be more vegetation, or it might be at the forefront of trialing some methane reduction science, which Justine mentioned, which I think is science is going to be a really, really interesting part of solving our methane emissions in New Zealand, and some pretty exciting stuff coming, whether it be in Asparagopsis, seaweed, or other science that's going to lower that methane emission. So know your number and know what techniques are available to be able to make it a better number.
Yeah, and all businesses in time will need to know their numbers. So I think it's something that everybody from, your local hairdresser to a supermarket chain, everyone's going to have to know their number and understand how they can offset their emissions.
That's magic. Thank you. And on behalf of everyone here at the event and the team behind the scenes at Spark Lab, let me just say a huge thank you to you both for giving up so much of your time to share your journey with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Justine Troy and Geoff Ross.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
You're welcome, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you also to those who have joined us for the Spark Lab virtual event. As always, feel free to leave your feedback, and we look forward to you joining us again for our next Spark Lab Speaker Series event. E noho rā.